Welcome to the Lone Star Capital Podcast. I'm Rob Beardsley, founder and principal.
And I'm Craig McGrouther, Director of Business Development.
On this show, we talk about real estate investing, business,
and so much more.
Welcome back to another episode of the Lone Star Capital Podcast with the big dogs today. We got the Sheriff Sam Morris, partner to the firm, our additional boots on the ground in the Texas market, the Houstonian. Sam, thank you for joining us. And then, of course, alongside him, we've got Rob Beardsley, founder and CEO of the company, who's been grinding his heart out on some very, very important topics to deliver incredible shareholder value for all of our investors and soon-to-be partners, dialing in some systems. Just want to give a quick shout out to our Lone Star Capital Summit that's coming up, the 5th iteration coming up in New York City. Apply or application only, invitation only, hand-selected, curated environment to meet the best and brightest of the network. This is your chance to meet the people you're going to be doing deals with in 2025 and beyond. Get your tickets. It's on our website. You know where to find it. Don't want to go too long-winded there because we've got a very tight and jam-packed episode today for you. And we're going to discuss actually Sam's visit to New York City, as well as the latest and greatest as to what we know with the ever-changing and evolving and fluid endeavors with the tax exemptions and all stuff like that. So we're going to hopefully answer some questions as it pertains to us, if you've invested with us and those type of programs, and what it means if you're with other people, and just generally what we know as of today, which is June 5th of 2025. These things need to be caveated and timestamped because information is changing day by day, minute by minute, seemingly. But with that said, Sam, let's get right into it. You were in New York City for a couple of days to connect and kind of develop more rapport with our team, to really understand some of our systems, as you've been, the lead and the boss as well before. Getting into this role, the value is not just the capital raising ability, but it's all facets of the company and the business that you can really help on. So Sam, how was your experience there? What were some of your takeaways?
Yeah, and it's so funny because I was able to update Rob a little bit on this too, and I shortened it really at the front of it, and I said, man, we got a great team, and I really can't stress that enough from the standpoint of what that does from the value that it delivers shareholders, the benefits that it does for all the employees that are on site, to the benefits it does for the residents that we serve, right? We got over, effectively we service up to 5,000 families here in the state of Texas. It's a big taking, and the people that are running and at the helm of it are really just great quality people. And I specifically was, ingrained a lot more with our asset managers. So both, Liam and Joe and Sawyer, and just understanding the things that they do on a day in and day out basis, where strengths and weaknesses are, and how great they work together too. And the benefits that we as a company get from them and their oversight and what they're doing on a day-to-day basis. It was a blessing to get to see and get to watch and get to learn from those guys and, see how everybody does it. Every company's a little bit different the way that they do things. And we're no different from being different that way. But, we have some great people at the corporate level. And I think that's probably one of the things that really stood out as just, a blessing to be able to get to see while I was up there.
Without a doubt. So while you were there, what were some of the kind of the items that you were going over? What were some of the items that you wanted to kind of get some more certainty on? Just was it more of a compare and contrast, or just kind of a downloading kind of session, if you will?
It was there was quite a few things. So it wasn't just the asset managers I got to talk to, right? Brad and I had some really good time, which Brad obviously runs the bulk of the acquisition side of things for us, and really getting to hear a lot of the hurdles or challenges that he's seeing day in and day out, and get to, when you're face to face, it's a little bit easier. You can glean a lot more from what he's really feeling, what he's really saying, than just us talking on the phone, right? It'd be beautiful to have just a weekly cadence with Brad, for me and him to just talk every single week. But the way that the market moves is it's always ad hoc, right? Because when he needs something, he needs it right now. We need to discuss it right now. And that's part of the competitive advantage that we have at Lone Star Capital, right? Because we have that ability to be that nimble. And, Brad goes, hey, look, I got this. Is there a way you can get out there and go take a look at it? And it's like, yeah, I know speed where it wins, right? We want to be the first one there. We want to have our foot in the door. We want to let brokers know and sellers know that we're here to acquire, and that's part of what we do. And so just having a lot more of those conversations and where we are philosophically, where we are strategically, and how that's going to work out. That was actually a great, wonderful thing to do. And we did that, multiple days that we were out there. I'd actually sidebar this a little bit too, because one of the things that was kind of a pleasant surprise, and they don't get much love, is our HR department, right? I'm telling you what, we just brought on Taylor this week, I think, and Hannah does a great job. And I think if the rest of employees actually knew how much she goes to bat for them, what she does for them on a daily basis, how she is fighting and scrapping for them every day, and the amount of time and effort and work she does, and how she has them in the forefront of their mind. Our employees really should be appreciative of how much work she's doing on their behalf and for their benefit. And so that was great to see. I mean, it's one of the things that you sit there and you go, wow, this is really something where it's a very uplifting culture, right? And then I would say, I would kind of wrap it all up by saying the cultural index was something that I had expressed to Rob ahead of time. That was something that I wanted to learn a little bit more, because it's a very scientific way of the way we've been building the team. And Rob was kind enough to do a little workshop for us my last evening there. And, there were a handful of us that sat in just to listen and understand. And really, there's a lot of benefits associated with that, even within the team members, of understanding what the other team members are like, really what gets them going, where they're going to be strong, where they're going to need assistance, how to communicate with them. There's a lot of benefits associated with that. And so it was a jam-packed, call it 48 hours for me while I was up there, but it was something that was very fruitful, and I'm really happy that I was able to go and get to see everybody.
Yeah, and as we add you to our team, we've added you, of course, as we've merged companies and whatnot, understanding and having a fluid concept as to how the corporate level works, and it is obviously very valuable for you to convey to your investors. You know what that's like. It's more than just some fancy office space at the One World Trade Center, one of the most beautiful office buildings in the world, not the country, but the world. And, there's busy bees up there, making things happen. And, really happy that you mentioned that the HR side of things, and just for perspective, how crucial that is. Our HR and the way we're structured at our level, and as you mentioned, every company is different. Hannah and Taylor are going to be the first faces that people see at the company, and to make sure that they are first off, they love what they do, and it kind of wakes them up, just like it would wake up Rob to underwrite deals or kind of figure out a business venture or capital formation structure, just like Brad likes to get into numbers, just like Sam likes taking people to lunch and whatnot, just like I like golfing with investors. They need to love their side of the business as much as we love what we do. And different people need to play different roles for the common goal, which is for us to have the best talent at every single position, for us to all thrive and succeed. That's all companies are, just a collection of people, as Rob always says, that are doing their specific role to the best of their capability within the marketplace. So they are the faces of the company, the first hiring for all sorts of people throughout, our company, not just the corporate side, but also on the team side. So getting those hiring right, that might be the most important hire that you make. You can underwrite deals perfectly, acquire them well, but if you can't manage them, oh boy, it's not going to work out.
And
Yeah,
you can't manage without people.
Thing, right? Yeah, it's a collective thing, right? It's not just HR. It's the asset managers too. It's understanding those all the people that are on the team and how they work together. And so if anything, I say it with a bit of swagger too. It's an honor and a privilege to get to work for Lone Star Capital. I mean, It really is, and I really would hope that everybody feels that way that gets to work with us.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing is how much we care at all sorts of things. And I think one of the most special things that I've seen within the company, and this is kind of how we want to look at it holistically, and this is peeling back the curtain a bit into the weeds, and we'll end the weed talk, so to speak, getting in there, if you will, after kind of a couple more thoughts here. But Rob's goal, it seems, from my perspective, and Rob, correct me if I'm wrong, is you want to hire everyone up, get everyone as autonomous as possible, get the best people there, and then move on to the next project and upgrade and improve. And then, manage here and there, but you're not really a big micromanager. That's not really what your day to day is. I think you have to do that to a certain extent if you're in the operations world and the property management world, if you will, asset management, property management. But you've made some incredible key hires that allow you to get to the next thing and for us to all be collectively the most productive and efficient.
That's my personal management style. Like to, my preference is to trust people. My preference is to believe in them and to give them the opportunity to grow rather quickly. Because if you're always limiting someone and saying, oh, well, you can't figure that out on your own, or, you shouldn't do that without management or oversight, and then it's true, right? If you believe it, then it's true. But also, if you believe in someone and they believe in themselves, they can actually rise very quickly, like we've seen in our company time and time again. But yeah, that's my personal style, but I don't necessarily think that's how everyone should manage top to bottom, because I think that management style is, I hate to say it, a luxury that I get to enjoy because I have great people around me. But that's not a given, right? That is actually very, very rare. For the most part, when you're dealing with uh, lower, more entry level positions, there's just naturally more coaching, more oversight, more training. So I kind of get to skip that a little bit because I have awesome people like you that I get to hang out with all day. So it makes my life easier. But definitely throughout the company, we have much more kind of oversight, management, weekly calls, monthly calls, different types of interactions. And we have like a Friday marketing training, and we have Friday income bank account reconciliation training, and making sure that all the property managers are doing the bookkeeping properly. So you can't, no business runs on autopilot, unfortunately.
Yeah, but all we can do is put the best systems in place. And I can just speak to how, when I was first getting going within this business, several years ago, and you're like, no, you're ready to do that. I'm like, oh my gosh, no, I'm not. But you just had the faith in me. And then obviously, as time kind of worked itself out, here I am doing exactly what you probably set out for me to do, and hopefully a little bit more. So I can't speak to that. It doesn't happen overnight, but it's really cool to see the growth of many people, particularly the HR part. Particularly other people, that I get to work with directly, seeing Brad ascend, seeing Dasha ascend, and now getting to learn from Sam. I just feel like my knowledge has grown and my appetite to learn more has never been higher. So all good stuff within the corporate side of things. We're very, very lucky. And we've made some very good moves. And speaking of making very good moves, let's transition into the talk of the town. And quite frankly, something that's stirring up a lot of attention, some perhaps misnomers, something that's actually very near to and dear to us, which was what went through here coming up on the HB21 bill. If I'm not mistaken, that's the exact name of it. I've listened, I've read as much as I possibly could, but I would love to hear some perspectives from Sam and Rob pertaining to this. So Rob or Sam, if either one of you guys want to take it away as to exactly what this is, the impact, and then we can go to our portfolio and what it means to you, our investor or our future partner, our current partner, and everything in between.
Sure. So, yeah. So, okay, HB21 was signed into law on May 28, and it has really shocked the Texas world because everybody knew that during this legislative process that there was going to be something that addresses affordable housing structures in Texas. And so, namely, you've got public facility corporations or PFCs, you have housing finance corporations or HFCs, and then inside of those, you have different structures and chapters like 302, 303, 392, 394. And so all of it falls under these general umbrella of basically a developer partners with a housing authority or some sort of government enterprise, and they do a joint venture to develop or purchase a property. They make that property an affordable housing property by restricting incomes and rents, making it affordable housing. In exchange, through this ownership structure, there can be a partial or full property tax exemption, which can be up to 99 years. So these have, I think at their core, they mean very well because it's a really savvy tool to be able to create a lot of affordable housing quickly. And it's a public-private partnership, which is really the best way to get things done because, if you leave everything up to the government, that might not go so smoothly or efficiently. So I think at its core, it's a great idea, but unfortunately, just given the way that the laws are written, there was abuse, and so everybody knew that the various forms of abuse were going to be addressed, or at least attempted to be addressed. But I don't think really anyone predicted how severe the law, which is HB21, would come down on these various structures, specifically most harshly on what are colloquially referred to as traveling HFCs, which basically means where you have a non-jurisdictional government agency. So it could be a housing authority from the town over, or all the way across Texas. And that far away housing authority would basically travel. The traveling HFC would partner with a developer to acquire, develop a property in Austin, Houston, Dallas, etc., and do an HFC in that area. And so the reason why this is very fraught and why it doesn't really logically make sense to begin with, but it's just given the way the laws were written, it allowed for it, is you had a situation where a non-jurisdictional housing authority could actually exempt the taxes for a local jurisdiction. So take tax revenue away from a local city and then redirect it somewhere else, right? And so you kind of have a moral hazard or perverse incentives, because if you're a local housing authority that's interested in both collecting tax revenue, which then you can use that revenue to benefit your people in your area and your constituents, or you can choose to forego those property taxes by creating affordable housing, which also benefits your constituency and your city. That all makes sense. But if you're dealing with a non-jurisdictional traveling HFC, so then that out-of-town housing authority doesn't care about the local constituents, so they don't care about taking tax revenue away from that area, and they're happy to, bring tax revenue or payments in lieu of tax revenue to their jurisdiction. So that has now basically, to get to the brass tacks of it, I know there's a lot to explain here, but the brass tacks of it is this new law has effectively killed traveling HFC property tax exemptions starting January 1st, 2027. So there is no grandfather clause here, which really, this is so harsh. Nobody predicted this. There's going to be so many lawsuits because many people are going to argue that this is unconstitutional, and this 100% will go before the Texas Supreme Court, because people are going to simply say, you can't have a law that says one thing and then you basically kill the law and then it's not grandfathered in, because take away kind of I'm not, a constitutional lawyer, obviously, but you just look at the facts on the ground, and it's a very, very, very bad look for Texas, because it shows the world that, hey, if you come to do business in Texas, we might just flip the script on you and change the game. So that could deter.
Yeah.
Yeah, it could deter future capital investment in Texas. Now, I don't think it's obviously going to, absolutely, change the game for Texas or ruin its entire economy. That's overstating it big time. But affordable housing, I think that's going to make it very scary. There's a lot of people that mean to do very well when they talk about doing affordable housing projects. And if you're looking at Texas, you might say, you know what, maybe I'll just do my affordable housing initiative somewhere else, because I'm scared that the rules might change, the laws might change, and I might be finding myself in a really bad situation.
Yeah, so let me just summarize this once more, because this is important just to conceptualize this. We've all heard of tax exemption, tax abatement deals. This is directly talking about those where, let's say you're acquiring a deal in Dallas, Texas, but you are working with a different county, a different jurisdiction to do a HFC within Dallas. You would basically acquire and get the consultant, get the people to work within that county to do a tax exemption in a different county, not working, directly in there, to circumvent that. And the issue with this is, although you're creating potentially affordable housing, some people took advantage of that where these deals weren't really actually preserving that much affordability. You would basically take away revenue in that local jurisdiction, that local county, because of course Texas, very hefty property taxes, no income taxes. So you're really actually hurting the revenue stream and the revenue sources that makes Texas go around. And then you're talking about all these firefighters, all these police officers, all these individuals whom essentially the revenue comes from what? Comes from obviously state funding and whatnot. And you're taking that away, but these places, these properties still act within these areas. How do you serve and protect these people when there's no revenue coming in, particularly when you're not really providing that much benefit? So that is the problem there, that a lot of people use and abuse this. They would go from county X into county Y, get this benefit, but it wasn't really done the appropriate way. Sam, I don't know if you have any comments just on the start, and then we'll kind of go into how we sit, what this means for you, and we can kind of go on further. But I just wanted to once more summarize this a little swiftly.
Yeah, that's the impetus of the bill, right? Is they're trying to, it's going to impact those that got this exemption not through their local, governing body. And that's really what it. I mean, if you shrink it down to that, and in government, you'll always see that pendulum swings one way or the other. So they either overdo it or wildly overdo it the other way. So it's just how it works, and then they end up having to fix what they did. And so whether it be through the legal system or they have another vote and adjust the bill at a later point.
Yeah. So we're talking about the HFC. So there was the PFC, there was the HFC, and there's some other deals. I don't think we need to get into the nuances of it, if you will. But let's just talk, Rob and Sam, about the deals that we have within our portfolio. The number of deals we have in our portfolio is roughly about 22, right? And of those 22 deals, we have 13 deals, I should say, that are in tax exemption structures. They're slightly varying of these, but I just want to give some surety. As I said, it is June 5th today. Information is changing, but every tax exemption we've done was fortunately within the jurisdiction and with the local municipalities. So that means that we worked with the Houston Housing Authority and the SAHA, San Antonio Housing Authority, to successfully and to wisely have done this appropriately within jurisdiction to provide that affordable housing. So just want to caveat it there. But Rob, do you want to kind of get into what property of ours are in said structure, and then also perhaps what this means long term and kind of the nuances there perhaps?
Yeah, so let's go into a bit more about what the bill says. So kind of the big thing I mentioned was for all traveling HFCs, you're going to lose your property tax exemption come 2027. Period. So, well, I mean, there is a path, right? So the law does say if you are able to get a cooperation agreement with the local governing body and basically bring that into compliance, and then you're able to also meet some more stringent affordability rules, specifically about compliance kind of audits and things like that, but also you need to have rent reductions that are greater or equal to 50% of your tax benefit. So if you're, let's just say, getting a tax exemption worth $500,000, you need to prove at least $250,000 per year worth of rent reductions versus, where your rents are versus market rate. So that's your path if you're a traveling HFC in order to preserve your tax exemption. But as you mentioned, Craig, there were what you could call some bad actors who basically found this opportunity to go to out-of-market housing authorities and do these tax exemptions on deals that really there was no creation or preservation of affordable housing.
And
so it's very...
One comment as well. One thing to say is, a lot of these deals that were put into these HFC, these traveling structures, were done because a lot of these operators bought deals and then they were kind of underwater, or this is a way to kind of preserve it. This was a lifeline in many respects for people to kind of extend their deals because they underwrote deals, they underwrote these opportunities, and they had to refinance them into these structures in order to keep the deal alive because perhaps they bought the deal on a bridge, perhaps they bought the deal on a floating rate structure. perhaps there was many nuances and wrinkles here where, you were kind of looking around and kind of, SOL, for lack of better words there, right? So you were in a very, very tough situation where you kind of had to restructure your deal to kind of help your NOI here in order to kind of keep this deal alive to not get foreclosed. So unfortunately, there are a lot of people that had to do it this way. And I think, like anyone, if you could find this opportunity to do an HFC structure, you kind of had to do that. You owed it to your investors. So you're not necessarily a bad guy, but it did kind of use and abuse a lot of the kind of the spirit of the kind of exemption. And, it doesn't really create that much affordability, which is kind of the moral problem as you were alluding to beforehand. But I just want to say, if you did that, you're not necessarily a bad person. You owed it to your investors to do it or to pursue it. There just could be some potential recourse coming up here now that is undesirable.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually. Basically, necessity is the mother of invention, and people were finding themselves in need of a solution given that their capital structure was upside down. And like you said, they found themselves underperforming relative to their debt service, and their lenders upset with them, and that's a bad situation to be in. And so, of course, you're going to turn to a solution that, maybe you wouldn't have otherwise. And so that's what really opened the floodgates to bring many, many sponsors to this affordable housing structure. Not far fewer people kind of have affordable housing business plans built into their company like us, where we actually acquired deals from the outset with the intention of placing the property in service as an affordable housing property, and doing the partnership from day one, right? A lot of these were conversions where they had bought the property. Their business plan was probably to renovate the asset, push rents higher in order to make a return on investment. But instead, they found themselves in a situation where rents were actually falling, occupancies were falling, interest rates were rising, insurance costs were rising, property taxes were rising, and this was a potentially very powerful solution. So now that that solution is being unwound in 2027 for many folks, it's kind of like back to the drawing board, because you're going to find yourself again in that situation where you have not enough NOI to cover debt service. You're not going to have enough NOI to justify a refi without bringing major cash in. So by 2027, when these properties lose their exemptions, if it does come to pass the way that the bill passed into law recently, I think you're going to see a pickup in activity, probably even anticipation of that 2027, because people aren't going to want to scramble for a solution after it's too late, right? So I even think in 2026, people are going to be doing major recapitalizations of their deals, which means they'll be refining out their bridge lender, or doing a bridge to bridge, or bringing in a preferred equity partner, or doing a major capital call. They're going to their investors and saying, hey, you put in 100 grand, can you put in another 50? And so that way we can really pay down the loan and buy ourselves time and cover these property taxes. So with that being said, though, I think something that is important is there's no clawback here. So these traveling HFC partnerships aren't going to be forced to pay the taxes that they did not pay, right? So the exemption on those taxes are going to stand, but it's just not going to go beyond 2027. So for some people, if they went ahead and did a traveling HFC deal, let's say in maybe even 21 or maybe even 22, and you got 2, 3, 4 years worth of tax exemptions out of it, it was still a worthwhile endeavor to do it, even though now it's gone or will be gone.
So let's get into the breakdown as it sits for our portfolio. What does this mean? As we mentioned, first things first, every exemption that we have done has been through the local municipality with the local government. And that's kind of something that, if you heard us kind of speaking about our deals and whatnot, and perhaps there's some delays. Well, of course, government has delays, but when you do things by the book, everything doesn't go necessarily according to plan on escrows and periods there. I think anyone whom worked with us in relation to the Houston 3 property portfolio, Beckley, Highland, and Meritage could speak to or remember the 9-month-long delay in escrow we had in that opportunity. Perhaps 30 to 60 days longer on other deals that we had done. But that said, you can understand where that is there due to some of the complications and nuances in doing it the correct way. You're working with government here. But Rob, would you mind explaining and sharing the deals that we have, and maybe the deal and the structure it's in, and how they may or may not be affected? As I said, it is June 5th. Let's timestamp it. We just don't know what will come out if anything else does change. And obviously, if anything comes up, we'll keep you updated with the latest and greatest.
Absolutely. So, without going too far in the weeds, we have 6 deals in our portfolio that are in partnership with the Houston Housing Authority under a 392 PFC structure. Actually, they're actually 302s. So those are the real old school ones. So the 302s. And so given that they are in jurisdiction, tax exemptions, so they're done with the local government, and they're under Chapter 302, HB21 does not apply to these deals whatsoever, because HB21 only has to do with Chapter 394, which is HFC. And the thing here is we've been spending a lot of time talking about traveling HFCs, but HB21 actually does have quite a few things to say about even in jurisdiction 394s, which we'll get to in a moment. So firstly, I'll just cover the 6 PFCs in Houston that we have, which is Park at Champion Forest, Timberwalk Apartments, Madison at Bear Creek, Broadstone, Briar Forest, Briar Court, and Five Oaks. So all those deals, again, are under Chapter 302, and they're in jurisdiction. Now, we have some other deals which are under Chapter 392. So again, not 394, which is what HB21 affects. And these are our more recent acquisitions of Preserve at Copperleaf, Lakes at 610, formerly known as Cortland Med Center, and Vizcaya Apartments. So those deals, again, are all in jurisdiction with the Houston Housing Authority, and they are not under Chapter 394. So HB21 is silent on those structures.
And as we said, we don't know if anything will come out on those deals. It doesn't seem to be as scrutinized as the HB21 HFC traveling structure, but we just want to give you a flavor. If you're an investor, those deals seem to not be affected as we speak today, June 5th.
And then finally, we get to our Houston 3-pack, which you actually brought up already, which is Beckley Apartments, Highland Apartments, and Meritage. So that 3-property portfolio is an HFC. It is 394. So it is with the Houston Housing Authority, so it is in jurisdiction. So the Houston 3-pack will keep its exemption beyond 2027. However, HB21 does add additional affordable housing requirements on all 394s, irrespective of if they're in jurisdiction or not. And so this is something that we are now tracking. We are now making, kind of getting smart on and understanding, so that we're prepared for when the additional compliance requirements and additional affordable housing requirements are imposed. We are prepared. And so what's really interesting is back when we closed those deals originally, we actually closed on them with very, I would say, very extreme rent restrictions and income restrictions. And at the time, we bemoaned those restrictions. We said, "Oh wow, this is unfair. This is really tough. We're offering so much affordability." I mean, obviously, we do pride ourselves on being in the affordable housing business, but we have to make the numbers work at the end of the day, right? So, little did we know, a few years later, a bill would be passed like this to where we would have to be at that level of restriction anyway. So,
and
long
just
story.
lay out the terms as well, just to get a little bit more wrinkled here on the deal that are more affected than the other ones naturally due to the structure of it. So Beckley, Highland, and Meritage, initially we thought the deal would be kind of the more boilerplate terms with affordability. For those who may or may not know what that means, initially we thought we were going to do the deal with 50% of market rate units, which is standard. And then the other 50% are affordable, where of that 50, 30% would be at 80% of the area median income. And then 20% of that 50 slated would be at 60% of the area median income. However, these got a little bit more tight in regard to the affordability there, and it produced more affordable units there, if you will. So when we actually closed this deal after that 9-month long deal out of where, it actually ended up being 50% market rate and 50% at 60% AMI, which seems to be quite the blessing in disguise now, So it goes to show that who you work with does in fact matter. And, working with the city on these to provide affordability is obviously important. So I think we're more grateful than ever for the terms that we got in retrospect. But just wanted to caveat that and remind everyone as to how that structure is.
I'd add one more thing to all of this too, which I actually think is kind of a big curveball for a lot of operators that did this that we've already been addressing. So we just got done with our audit last month, actually just a few weeks ago. And from our audit, we recognized some things where we were going to be deficient or what we needed to work on more operationally too. And we're already addressing those things. So a lot of what we're already doing as a company is addressing the things that are going to make us come off much better in an audit. We're going to be much more organized, really at the site and property levels too, to allow us to show how easy it is that we're in compliance. Because I think actually compliance with a lot of this is going to be a challenge for a lot of operators who did like what you guys have described, and they did it as a means to an end, or what they really needed to do for survivability of the property, without having the understanding of all the things they need to do for an audit, without having all the processes in place to be able to stay in compliance. We're already doing that. We've been doing that. And that's how we've operated these things. And we're continually working out whatever kinks we may have. We will show better than most all other operators because of that, and allow us to really sail through those compliance issues, which I think is going to be a bigger challenge for a lot of operators.
Absolutely. So, Rob, is there any other nuance, or Sam, any other nuance you want to add in reference to the 3-property portfolio as we went through that structure and how that works? Or would you like to get to the next set of properties and the exemption there?
Well, I think I already covered all of the various exemptions. Basically you've got the ones that are cut and dried, not affected by HB21 whatsoever. And then you have the 3-property portfolio, the Beckley Highland Meritage portfolio, which is impacted with the harsher compliance, harsher restrictions, which were kind of already there. And so by the time 2027 comes around, we're, like Sam said, we're going to be really ready to go with whatever. I mean, can't say whatever, like you said, things are changing by the day and the week, so who knows? But we're prepared, and so we're obviously aware of what's going on. But like I mentioned before, I think that it's really this story is not over. There's going to be class action. There's going to be
Lobbying.
Texas Supreme Court's going to be involved. So it's really going to be very, very messy, and people are not going to go down without a fight. But I'm also optimistic, or at least excited, about all of the opportunities that may come as a result of this law over the next few years.
Yeah, no, acquisitions could totally change if there is, the repealing of these. A lot of deals may actually hit the market. So if you're an investor, maybe it's an opportunistic time for you to kind of pick up a more distressed property there, if you will. Only property, by the way, which is separate from the Houston Housing Authority and a separate exemption all entirely. But I would be it would be amiss for us to not mention this, which is Aspire Apartments, formerly known as Aspire, now known as Regency Grove, our solo asset in San Antonio, which is, of course, in a tax exemption structure. That is in a community housing development organization. The acronym for that, if you want to say it aloud, is a CHODO. This is not something that's really heavily scrutinized. We've got, obviously, the affordable restrictions there. It's on a ever-going, reapplying basis. As we explained to every investor who got into that deal on the front end, this seems to not be something that even Houston does. I don't even think Dallas does it. I think only a couple of markets within Texas actually honor that. San Antonio and Austin, I believe, are the markets there that, in fact, work on that, if my memory serves me. But with that said, this deal is not really being mentioned or talked about in that manner there. So if you are an investor or a partner in that deal, as I said, June 5th, doesn't seem like there's any talk about that as we speak right now. But should something change, we will let you know. So, I think there's also some other fallout to mention here. Before we wrap up this episode, which we've gone really nice and long on, about 30 minutes for this, which is, this is probably the most important thing. If you're an investor, you're probably thinking about this, particularly if you're in these structures. So the insights that Sam and Rob have provided here are very helpful. So thank you guys for doing that. But there's also some potentially negative stuff that Texas could find itself into with regard to agencies, right, and lending on these deals perhaps moving forward. So can you maybe, just as we wrap up here, maybe touch on that theme and anything else that you think would be important to mention before we end the show?
Sure. So debt is obviously at the center of real estate investing. And the agencies, which is what we refer to Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, are at the center of multifamily financing because they're the kind of go-to lenders for permanent financing. In the bridge world, you've got non-bank lenders and all sorts of capital providers, but for 5-year, 7-year, 10-year money for permanent financing, kind of like terminal financing, that is your takeout vehicle. So Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac really take up the majority of the market share there. So what was interesting is kind of as people rushed for the exits and rushed for the traveling HFC solution, of course, the agencies were there to finance these deals. But once they kind of started to see the writing on the walls and get a little bit concerned about these structures, they started to impose different restrictions or different requirements and making the signers of the loan, the sponsors, actually sign personal guarantees that if the exemption were to go away, they'd be personally liable for paying down the loan to bring the loan back to a 1.25 DSCR, which would be millions of dollars on most of these deals. So that's a risk that people in real estate generally take is, especially as a sponsor, you're signing on the loan. That's a risk that you're taking. And that there's an added risk there that if you do lose your exemption and you're getting debt from Fannie or Freddie, you might actually be on the hook personally to make sure that the loan gets paid down so that the debt service is in accordance with the requirement there, which is typically 1.25, which we talk about that magic number quite a lot on the podcast. It's the magic number for many lenders and kind of a conservative metric. So that started happening, and then kind of things even escalated further, and the agency said, well, we're just not going to finance these traveling HFCs whatsoever. Or we're willing to finance them, but we're not going to give any NOI credit to the tax exemption. So basically they're going to say, okay, you're getting this tax exemption, that's fine, knock yourself out, but we're going to pretend like it's not even there. And that's how we're going to evaluate the deal's income capabilities. So then it took a big wind out of the traveling HFC sales because one of the values of the HFC or a tax exemption was, of course, a reduction in expenses. But not only that, your reduction in expenses could be immediately translated into capitalized value because you could then get a loan based on that new higher income amount based on the exemption. So once that was taken away, then it made it less attractive for someone to do the tax exemption because they're not going to get any more debt from Fannie or Freddie, which is exactly what they need because they're looking at a $40 million bridge loan that they have from their existing lender, and that needs to be paid off, but Fannie and Freddie are only willing to give them 25, right? So you've got a big gap. So that's kind of all the latest and greatest. Then what was interesting is after HB21 passed, the agencies are now saying that they are opposing this law and that they're coming out and saying that they take big issue with it. So I mean, if you've got the government going against the government, and Fannie and Freddie is a big deal, obviously.
State versus federal, right?
Yeah, you're going to have some interesting stuff going on for sure.
Texans would consider it our country versus their country, but
Well, Californians feel the same way as well. It's funny, the ego that comes from the big state folk, right?
That's right.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for everyone who's listened to this show this far. If you have any questions and how this may affect you, if you're an investor of ours and want to learn more, if you're a passive listener but not a passive investor with us, that's a shame. You should get on our list. Reach out to me if there's anything you're looking for. If there's any help we can have, we're always looking to build new relationships with new partners to share the latest and greatest. If you like this show, make sure to like it, share with a friend. This could impact a lot of people, particularly those who are invested in Texas and some of these structures. We're here to help and be a resource to you. Thank you so much for listening. Buy your tickets to the summit. Apply for the summit. Maybe you'll get a complimentary invite. Who knows? But we'll see you next week.